There is a window in the gardening year that most people don't fully understand the value of until they've wasted it a few times. It opens in April and it closes faster than you expect. And the gardeners who recognize it, who understand what it offers and act on it deliberately, are the ones with the full, lush, overflowing container gardens that everyone stops to admire in July. The ones who wait, who hold off until the weather feels more reliably warm, until they're more certain, until May becomes June, those gardeners spend the entire summer looking at containers that never quite caught up. April is not just an acceptable time to plant containers, it is the best time, the optimal window, the month when cool soil temperatures encourage roots to develop before tops, when gentle warming days give establishing plants exactly the conditions their biology is designed to exploit, and when the long runway to summer heat gives every planted perennial the time it needs to build the kind of deep, strong, genuinely resilient root system that no June planting can replicate in the same season. The 10 perennials on today's list were chosen specifically because they don't just tolerate April planting, they thrive on it. Each one has a biological reason to go into the ground this month rather than next. Each one uses the cool soil, the gentle light, and the extended spring establishment window in a way that produces a measurably better container performance through summer and autumn than waiting would ever deliver. These are also plants that grow fast once conditions are right, not in a sprawling, unmanageable way, but in that deeply satisfying way where you check the container after 2 weeks and something has visibly changed. Where the plant looks more settled, more confident, more committed to its pot than it did when you first put it in. That early establishment momentum, triggered by April's ideal conditions, is what separates the containers that look spectacular by midsummer from the ones that look like they're still finding their footing in August. Let's go through all 10. Number 1 is Catmint. If you were going to design a plant specifically to take advantage of everything April offers a container gardener, you would end up with something that looked remarkably like Catmint. The alignment between what April provides and what Catmint needs at planting time is so precise that it almost seems deliberate, as though the plant evolved with this exact month in mind. The reason comes down to a specific relationship between soil temperature and root versus shoot growth. In April, when soil temperatures are sitting in that 45 to 60 degree range across most temperate zones, Catmint invests its establishment energy disproportionately into root development rather than above-ground growth. The root system races outward and downward through the cool spring potting mix, building an extensive underground network that will sustain the plant through every heat wave and dry spell that summer produces. The above-ground growth follows once that foundation is in place, and when it arrives with a confidence and a vigor that late-planted Catmint simply doesn't have. What this means in practical terms is a production timeline that runs earlier, longer, and more abundantly than anything a May or June planting can match. An April-planted Catmint container typically delivers its first lavender blue flush in late May or early June, genuinely weeks ahead of a container started later. That flush runs for 4 to 6 weeks of dense, soft, continuous color. Cut it back by half when it finishes, and the second flush rebounds by mid-July, fueled by that deep root system that has been building since April. In warmer climates, a third flush follows in September and carries the container display all the way to frost. 3 seasons of bloom in a single growing year, beginning earlier, finishing later, and performing more abundantly at every stage, all because the plant went into the container in April when the soil gave it exactly what it needed for the root establishment that makes everything else possible. Use a well-draining potting mix, ensure the container has excellent drainage, and give the establishing root system a light top dressing of compost at planting time. Walker's Low is the most reliable container variety, mounding to around 2 feet, spilling attractively over the rim, and building a progressively more impressive display with every season it returns to the same pot. Number 2 is Coral Bells. Coral Bells is the container perennial that benefits from April planting in 2 completely distinct ways simultaneously, and understanding both of them helps explain why this is so consistently one of the most rewarding April container plants available. The first benefit is color. Coral bells foliage pigmentation, those deep burgundies, near blacks, electric limes, warm ambers, and peachy silvers that make modern varieties so visually extraordinary, is most intense in cool temperatures. The plant chemistry responsible for those rich, saturated colors is most active when conditions are cool and bright, which is exactly what April provides. An April-planted coral bells hits the container in the moment of its most vivid and most intense coloring, and the weeks of cool spring conditions that follow allow that color to develop and deepen as the plant establishes, producing a specimen that is already visually commanding before summer has even properly begun. The second benefit is crown development. The crown, that compressed root mass from which all new leaves emerge, extends its growing points most actively in cool, moist soil. April planting drops coral bells into precisely those conditions at precisely the right moment, allowing 4 to 6 weeks of active crown expansion before summer warmth arrives, and the plant's energy shifts toward sustaining its above-ground display rather than building its underground infrastructure. A coral bells planted in April enters summer with a crown that is noticeably more developed, more vigorous, and more capable of producing the abundant leafy growth that makes a container specimen look genuinely full and established. The result, by July, is a container plant that looks weeks ahead of one planted in late May. More leaves, richer color, a fuller and more lush presence that occupies the container with an authority that takes late-planted alternatives much longer to achieve. Choose varieties with bold foliage color, obsidian for near-black drama, lime Ricky for electric chartreuse brightness, Georgia peach for that warm peachy silver that photographs beautifully, and place them where the April light can show the foliage at its most vivid. The container will earn attention from the moment it goes outside and keep earning it through every month that follows. Number 3 is daylily. The relationship between April planting and daylily container performance is one of the most directly measurable on today's entire list because the advantage of planting in April over planting in June shows up in a single, specific, completely countable way: flowerscapes. More of them. Noticeably, meaningfully more. Daylily flowering production is directly proportional to root system size and vitality. A larger, more extensively developed root system produces more scapes, more of those upright flowering stems that carry the buds that open into those beautiful, one-day-per-flower blooms that fill the container from late spring through autumn in rebloom varieties. A smaller, less developed root system produces fewer. The arithmetic is as simple as that. April soil temperatures are precisely the range in which daylily root systems develop most aggressively. Those thick, fleshy, tuberous roots extend rapidly through cool potting mix, building the storage capacity and the productive infrastructure that drives scape production. Every week of April root development is a week of direct investment in summer flowering performance. Plant in April and you bank 6 to 8 additional weeks of root growth compared to a June planting. And those weeks translate directly into more scapes, more buds per scape, and more total flower production across the season. The drought resilience advantage is equally significant and equally direct. Those thick, fleshy roots store moisture and nutrients the way a battery stores charge. An April-planted daylily container that has been developing its root system through spring can go meaningfully longer between waterings in July and August without showing stress than a June-planted container whose root system had less time and less favorable conditions for development. In a summer of irregular watering or unexpected heat, that resilience is not a minor benefit. It is the difference between a container that keeps performing and one that struggles visibly through the hottest weeks. Stella de Oro, Happy Returns, and Pardon Me are the 3 rebloom varieties that consistently deliver the most rewarding April container performance. All 3 stay compact enough for container culture, all 3 rebloom reliably through the season, and all 3 build into increasingly impressive specimens with each passing year. Use a container at least 16 inches across to give the root system the space it needs, and water consistently through April and May while establishment proceeds. Number 4 is lavender. Lavender has a biology that is rooted, quite literally, in Mediterranean seasonal rhythms. Cool, moist winters and springs when root development occurs actively and extensively, followed by hot, dry summers when the plant sustains itself on the strength of those spring-developed roots. That rhythm, repeated for millennia in the plant's native habitat, is written into its cellular behavior. And April container planting replicates it with a precision that no other month in the planting calendar can match. An April-planted lavender container enters the cool, moist spring conditions its biology expects and responds by doing exactly what it evolved to do in those conditions, growing roots. Extending that root system outward and downward through the potting mix with a focus and a speed that warm-season planting never produces. Because warm-season planting asks the plant to do something its biology isn't designed for. Establish roots when conditions are signaling it should be sustaining above-ground growth. The practical result is a container lavender that is typically blooming by late May or early June in its first season. That first flush of purple-blue flower spikes arrives with the full backing of a root system that spent April developing properly. And the fragrance is intense, the flower production is generous, and the drought tolerance through summer is genuine rather than marginal because the roots had the time and the right conditions to build real depth. The potting mix matters enormously, and it matters from day one. 1 part coarse grit or perlite to 2 parts potting mix in a terracotta container. That combination, started in April, gives lavender everything its biology is asking for and produces a container specimen that establishes faster, blooms earlier, and builds more confidently toward the increasingly beautiful seasons ahead than any other planting timing can deliver. Number 5 is coneflower. The coneflower's April planting advantage is entirely concentrated in one place, the taproot. That thick, carrot-like taproot that drives everything about how a container coneflower performs, not just in its first season, but in every season that follows. And April, with its cool soil temperatures sitting in the precise range where taproot extension is most vigorous, is the month when the foundation of all that future performance gets built. Echinacea taproots extend and deepen most rapidly in cool, moist soil. Every inch of taproot developed in April is an inch of anchoring, water storage, and nutrient capacity that will drive the above-ground growth, the scape production, and the multi-season improvement that makes container coneflowers so rewarding long-term. An April-planted coneflower that has been growing its taproot through 6 weeks of cool spring conditions before the first summer heat arrives is a genuinely different container plant from one planted in May or June. More drought-resilient, more vigorously blooming, and more capable of the multi-year performance escalation that perennial container gardening is built around. The bloom timeline reflects this directly. A well-established April planting typically produces first blooms in July of its first season, the traditional midsummer window when coneflowers are at their most ecologically generous, feeding bees and butterflies through the longest and most productive weeks of the pollinator season. A June planting may not reach that first bloom until August or September, losing weeks of potential production to the compressed establishment timeline. Use a container at least 14 to 16 inches deep to give the taproot the downward room it needs. Magnus is the most reliable container variety for first-season performance, with large rosy pink blooms on strong, upright stems that need no staking. Planted in April, water it through establishment, and then largely leave it alone. The taproot will handle the rest. Number 6 is ornamental salvia. Salvia planted in April uses the cool spring weeks to build something that isn't immediately visible, but that determines everything about how the container performs from late May onward: crown mass. That dense, compressed root crown from which every flower spike emerges, every flush rebounds, and every season's improvement originates. April conditions build more of it, faster, than any warmer planting window can match. The practical result shows in the first flush. An April-planted salvia container produces noticeably more simultaneous flower spikes in its first bloom period than a May or June planting in the same size pot. More spikes means more coverage, more structural presence, and a more impressively complete container display from the very first flowering. After that first flush, the stronger crown drives a faster and more abundant rebloom. A second wave that arrives sooner and performs more generously than late-planted alternatives can manage. Full sun of at least 6 hours from the first day is non-negotiable. In insufficient light, none of the April crown building advantage translates into visible bloom performance. Caradonna, Maynite, and East Friesland are the 3 varieties that consistently deliver the most rewarding April container results. Upright, richly colored, and building into increasingly impressive specimens with every season they return to the same pot. Number 7 is Sedum Autumn Joy. Autumn Joy uses April in a way that is architecturally visible by August. The crown growing points, those compressed initiation sites from which every architectural succulent stem emerges each season, extend most actively in cool, moist April soil. 6 weeks of April crown development before summer warmth arrives produces 2 to 3 additional stems in the first season compared to a late planting. 2 to 3 additional stems means 2 to 3 additional flat-topped flower heads, a measurably more impressive container specimen, and a measurably larger butterfly-covered display from late summer through October. Keep the potting mix lean and fast-draining from day 1. Rich, moist container mix produces the floppy, architecturally compromised stems that lose everything that makes Autumn Joy worth growing. Apply the Chelsea chop, cutting back by 1/3 in late May to ensure compact, self-supporting growth as the season progresses. Full sun required. Those conditions maintained from April planting produce a container specimen that gets more structurally commanding and more seasonally beautiful with every year it returns. Number 8 is Yarrow. Yarrow's rhizomes move fastest in cool soil, and April gives them the longest possible runway of optimal temperature before summer arrives. An April-planted yarrow container shows visible surface coverage from emerging foliage across the entire pot within 2 to 3 weeks of planting, rhizomes racing outward through cool potting mix and producing new foliage points rapidly across the container surface. That speed of coverage makes the container look abundantly planted almost immediately, which matters enormously in the early weeks of the season when slower establishing plants are still looking thin and newly placed. The flat-topped golden flower clusters that follow. Moonshine is the most reliable container variety, provide horizontal structure at mid-height that ties the container composition together with a visual completeness that few other plants at this price point can deliver. Lean soil, excellent drainage, full sun. Yarrow in those conditions, planted in April, establishes fast, covers quickly, and performs reliably through the hottest months the season produces. Number 9 is Astilbe. April is the month when Astilbe crown development is most active, most temperature favorable, and most directly connected to the plume count that will define the container's summer display. The cool, moist conditions of April are precisely what Astilbe's crown expansion mechanism requires, and 4 to 6 weeks of those conditions before summer warmth arrives produces a larger, more vigorous crown entering the bloom season than any warmer planting window can build. The shaded container position that Astilbe prefers also aligns perfectly with April's gentler light levels. Bright enough for active photosynthesis and growth, gentle enough to avoid the heat stress that summer sun exposure brings to freshly planted shade perennials. Plant Astilbe in April in a part shade position. Keep the container consistently moist from day 1, and the first summer's plume display will be noticeably more generous than a late planted alternative in the same spot. Number 10 is Black-Eyed Susan Goldstrom. Goldstrom closes the list with the most straightforward April planting arithmetic of any plant here. More rhizome development equals more above-ground growth clusters. More growth clusters equals more flower stems. More flower stems equals more of those bold golden blooms covering the container from midsummer through October. April gives Goldstrom the longest possible window of cool soil rhizome development before summer arrives, and every additional week of that development translates directly into more bloom potential by July. Zero deadheading required. Complete drought tolerance once established. Hardy from zone 3 through 9. Planted in April, water it through the first 6 weeks and then simply watch it perform, getting fuller, bolder, and more abundantly golden with every season it stays in the container. 10 perennials, 1 month, 1 decision that changes everything about how your container garden looks and performs from spring through the first frost. Catmint building its root system for 3 flushes of lavender blue. Coral bells coloring vividly through every cool spring week. Daylilies banking root development for more scapes than a June planting can produce. Lavender following its Mediterranean rhythm toward that first intensely fragrant flush. Coneflower driving its taproot deep before summer tests it. Salvia building crown mass for more spikes in every flush. Autumn joy forming its architectural stems from April-developed crown points. Yarrow racing its rhizomes across the container surface within weeks. Astilbe expanding its crown through the most favorable weeks of the year. Goldstrum extending its rhizome network for a midsummer display that covers the pot in gold. Plant in April, build in spring, perform all summer. That is what these 10 plants do when you give them the month they were made for. Thank you for watching this video. Click here to watch another video that might interest you.